The Galactic Assembly Hall floated above the burning clouds of Virilon Prime like a monument to power itself. Thousands of ships surrounded the artificial moon-sized station, each vessel representing one of the oldest civilizations in the galaxy. Species that had ruled star systems for millennia gathered beneath golden towers and crystal domes to discuss trade, war, and the future of known space. And today they had gathered for something far less important. Humanity, the newest species to reach faster-than-light travel. The youngest civilization ever invited into the Galactic Council. And, according to almost everyone present, the least impressive. Inside the assembly chamber, towering alien representatives watched holographic footage of Earth rotating slowly in the center of the room. Blue oceans shimmered beneath white clouds. Tiny lights marked human cities across the continents. The hall was silent for several seconds. Then the laughter began. They still use combustion engines on civilian worlds? One delegate sneered. Another leaned forward, 6 glowing eyes narrowing with amusement. Their military fleet is microscopic. They possess fewer than 500 interstellar-capable warships. A third delegate clicked its claws together. Their average lifespan is under 1 century. Primitive biology, primitive technology, primitive culture. The mocking spread through the chamber like wildfire. Humanity had entered the stars barely 100 years ago. Most galactic civilizations had histories stretching back tens of thousands of years. Some had ruled sectors of space before humans had even discovered metal tools. To the ancient empires, humanity looked pathetic, weak, uncivilized, temporary. The Supreme Chancellor of the Galactic Empire itself finally rose from his throne at the center of the chamber. The silence returned instantly. Emperor Kale Varos of the Zyran Dominion was over 300 years old and ruled the largest empire in known history. For 10,000 years, the Dominion had controlled trade routes, conquered systems, and crushed rebellions before they could spread. Entire species obeyed them without question. Kale stared at Earth's hologram with visible disgust. "This," he said slowly, "is the species requesting equal representation in the council?" A nervous attendant nodded. "Yes, Your Excellency." Kale turned toward the gathered delegates. "They pollute their own atmosphere. They fight wars among themselves constantly. Their governments are fractured. Their colonies depend on outdated infrastructure." His voice hardened. "And these creatures believe they belong among us?" The chamber erupted with agreement. Only a few representatives remained silent. The Valari ambassador watched carefully without speaking. The old reptilian diplomat had studied humanity for years. Unlike the others, he wasn't laughing, because he had read human history, and human history disturbed him. Humans had survived ice ages, global wars, plagues, nuclear devastation, economic collapse, and environmental disasters, all before reaching the stars. Most species achieved unity before advanced spaceflight. Humans achieved spaceflight while divided, angry, and constantly competing against one another. That was not normal. That was terrifying. But nobody listened when he tried to warn them. The Chancellor raised one hand for silence. "Humanity will not receive equal status," Kale announced. "They will serve as a minor auxiliary civilization under Dominion oversight." The words hit the chamber like a verdict. Not allies, not equals, subjects. The human delegation stood motionless near the back of the hall. There were only 4 of them. Compared to the massive alien representatives surrounding them, they looked small and fragile. At their center stood Ambassador Elena Reyes. She listened to the insults without visible anger. That unsettled the Valari ambassador even more, because humans were emotional creatures, proud creatures. Yet this woman stood perfectly calm while an entire galaxy mocked her species. Kale looked directly at her. "You may respond." Every eye in the chamber turned toward the humans. Elena stepped forward slowly. "We appreciate the Council's honesty," she said calmly. Several delegates laughed again. Kale smirked. "Honesty is often painful for lesser civilizations." Elena ignored the comment. "There is something humanity has learned throughout its history," she continued. When older powers call younger people primitive, it usually means they've underestimated them. The chamber fell slightly quieter. Kale leaned back in his throne. Is that a threat, human? No, Elena answered. A warning. More laughter exploded across the room. The Chancellor's expression darkened. You stand inside the heart of the most powerful empire in galactic history. 10,000 years of dominance. Entire species kneel before the Dominion. And you dare warn us? Elena met his eyes. Yes. For the first time, a strange tension entered the chamber. Not fear. Discomfort. Because the human ambassador didn't sound defensive. She sounded certain. Kale finally waved dismissively. You are dismissed. Humanity will accept Dominion oversight or lose access to galactic trade routes. The human delegation exchanged brief glances. Then Elena spoke one final sentence before turning away. Empires that last too long forget something important. Kale narrowed his eyes. And what is that? Elena's voice became cold. How to survive losing. Then the humans walked out of the chamber. The massive doors closed behind them. The assembly hall remained silent for several moments. Finally, the laughter returned. But not everyone joined in this time. The Valari ambassador stared at the closed doors with growing unease. Because throughout galactic history, primitive species usually acted with fear when confronted by superior powers. Humans had not acted afraid. They had acted patient. And patience was dangerous, especially in predators. Far away from the assembly hall, beyond the polished core worlds of the Dominion, humanity's territories spread across the outer frontier regions. Compared to the great empires, human space looked unimpressive. Small colonies, mining stations, shipyards, harsh frontier planets. But hidden beneath that modest appearance was something the galaxy had completely failed to understand. Human civilization had not been built during peace. It had been forged through crisis. Every human colony operated independently because Earth's governments had never fully trusted one another. Every human shipyard could rapidly convert into a military factory because humans always prepared for war. Every civilian pilot received emergency combat training because pirates, disasters, and border conflicts were considered part of normal life. Humanity did not rely on ancient stability. Humanity relied on adaptation. And adaptation was far more dangerous than the galaxy realized. Inside a secure underground facility beneath Mars, military leaders watched recordings of the Galactic Council meeting in silence. Admiral Nathan Cole folded his arms. So, he muttered, they finally showed their true colors. Around the table, generals and intelligence officers exchanged grim expressions. One analyst activated a holographic display showing Dominion fleet positions. They already control 62% of major trade routes, she explained. If humanity accepts auxiliary status, we become economically dependent within 20 years. And militarily vulnerable within 30, another officer added. Cole nodded slowly. He had expected this outcome. Humanity's first contact with alien civilizations had seemed hopeful decades earlier. Shared knowledge, cooperation, expansion into a larger universe. But old empires feared new rivals, especially unpredictable ones. What are our options? Someone asked quietly. The room fell silent. Finally, an older strategist spoke. We prepare. Cole looked toward him. For war. The strategist hesitated. No, he answered carefully. For survival. Because deep down, humanity already understood something terrifying. The Galactic Empire would never allow humans to become equals. Not peacefully. And history had taught humanity one brutal lesson above all others. When powerful empires fear rising powers, war becomes inevitable. Far above Mars, hidden fleets drifted silently in the darkness beyond detection grids. Shipyards accelerated production schedules. Mining worlds increased resource extraction. Research stations received emergency funding. Officially, humanity remained calm. Unofficially, Earth had begun preparing for the possibility of galactic war. And across the stars, the ancient Dominion laughed at the primitive species they believed would obey them. They did not realize they had just made the greatest mistake in their empire's 10,000-year history. The Galactic Dominion had ruled the stars for so long that most civilizations could no longer imagine a galaxy without it. 10,000 years of conquest had transformed the empire into something larger than a government. It was a force of nature. Entire species were born, lived, and died beneath Dominion authority without ever questioning its permanence. The empire controlled hyperspace trade lanes, military shipyards, communication networks, and resource worlds across thousands of systems. Its fleets were so massive that some battle groups took weeks just to fully pass through a star system. To most of the galaxy, resistance against the Dominion was impossible, which was exactly why the empire had grown arrogant. And arrogance blinds even the strongest powers. Inside the Imperial War Chamber on Virilon Prime, massive holographic maps floated above black marble floors. Red lights marked Dominion territory stretching across the spiral arm of the galaxy. At the center of the room stood Emperor Kale Varos. Military commanders surrounded him in silence as reports streamed across the tactical displays. A fleet admiral bowed slightly. Human trade convoys continue refusing Dominion oversight inspections. Kale barely looked interested. Confiscate the ships. Some convoys are escorted by armed vessels. A faint smile appeared on the Emperor's face. Even better. The commanders exchanged grim looks. Everyone in the chamber understood what was happening. The Dominion wanted a confrontation. Not a full war, not yet. Just enough pressure to force humanity into submission. For centuries, this strategy had worked perfectly against younger civilizations. Economic restrictions, limited military intimidation, political isolation. Most species surrendered long before open conflict became necessary. But humans were different in one dangerous way. Pressure did not make them surrender. Pressure made them angry. Kale turned toward the holographic image of human territory. "Remind me," he said calmly, "how many inhabited systems do the humans possess?" 43 confirmed colonies, Your Excellency. "And military strength?" The admiral almost sounded amused. "Insignificant compared to Dominion forces." Kale nodded. Then this matter should resolve quickly. No one disagreed aloud. But several commanders remained uneasy, because reports from human space had become increasingly strange over the past months. Human ship production had tripled. Civilian transport routes were being converted into emergency supply corridors. Outer colonies had begun constructing orbital defense platforms far beyond normal requirements. And perhaps most concerning of all, humanity had stopped arguing internally. For the first time in recorded history, Earth's competing governments appeared united. That alone terrified Dominion intelligence analysts, because division had always been humanity's greatest weakness. Now it was disappearing. Far from the imperial capital, deep within the Sol system, the United Earth Defense Council gathered beneath the lunar fortress known as Bastion Command. Unlike the elegant halls of the Dominion, the human command center looked functional and brutal. Steel walls, reinforced blast doors, massive tactical displays. Everything built for survival. Admiral Nathan Cole stood before the council table while officers projected incoming intelligence reports. Dominion patrols have seized 7 civilian cargo ships in the Vega corridor, an intelligence officer announced. Another report appeared instantly. 2 mining colonies report communications interference from Imperial relay stations. Then another. Dominion ambassador has formally demanded military access to our frontier sectors. The room grew colder with every update. President Amelia Ward finally spoke. "How long until they move openly?" Nobody answered immediately. Then Cole sighed. "They already have." Silence filled the chamber. Everyone there understood the truth. The Dominion wasn't preparing for peace negotiations. It was testing humanity's response. Pushing slowly, applying pressure, looking for weakness, exactly the same way ancient human empires once manipulated smaller nations on Earth. The difference was that humans recognized the pattern immediately, because they had invented it. General Marcus Hale leaned forward. "The question is simple. Do we resist now while we still can? or wait until the Dominion controls our economy completely? President Ward looked exhausted. A war against the galaxy's largest empire sounded insane. Humanity was outnumbered, outgunned, outmatched technologically in many areas. But surrender carried its own dangers. History showed what happened to civilizations absorbed by massive empires. Cultures vanished. Freedoms disappeared. Innovation slowed beneath centralized control. Humanity would survive biologically, but it would stop being human. And that possibility frightened Earth's leaders more than war itself. Ward turned toward Cole. If conflict becomes unavoidable, can we win? The Admiral answered honestly. Not conventionally. The room became silent again. Then he activated another holographic display. Unlike the polished Dominion fleets shown in galactic records, this display revealed something entirely different. Compact attack carriers, autonomous drone swarms, experimental stealth frigates, mobile shipyards hidden inside asteroid belts. Human war doctrine did not rely on overwhelming force. It relied on adaptation, mobility, and unpredictability. We studied every empire in human history, Cole explained. The larger the empire becomes, the more dependent it grows on stability. He pointed toward Dominion trade routes crossing the galaxy. Massive supply lines, centralized command structures, predictable military patterns. General Hale nodded slowly. Big targets. Exactly. Another officer frowned. You're talking about asymmetric warfare against a civilization 10,000 years older than us. Cole's expression hardened. That's the only kind humanity has ever survived. Meanwhile, on the outer colony world of Kepri Station, ordinary humans were beginning to notice changes. Military patrols increased daily. Civilian factories shifted into wartime production. Recruitment centers overflowed with volunteers. But perhaps the strangest transformation was psychological. Fear existed, certainly, yet beneath it something else was growing. Defiance. The Dominion expected humanity to panic under pressure. Instead, millions of humans reacted with stubborn resistance. Social networks exploded with anti-imperial sentiment. Old documentaries about Earth's wars suddenly became wildly popular again. Historical speeches about freedom, survival, and resistance spread across every colony. The more the Dominion threatened humanity, the more united humans became. And that was the Empire's second mistake. Because the Dominion believed peace created strength. Humanity knew struggle created strength. On Virilon Prime, Imperial Intelligence Director Serac entered the Emperor's private chamber carrying classified reports. Kale looked annoyed already. What now? Serac bowed carefully. Human fleet activity has increased by 400%. Kale rolled his eyes. Posturing. Perhaps, Serac replied cautiously. But there are additional concerns. The Emperor gestured impatiently. Speak. Human cyber warfare units breached 3 Dominion trade networks last week. Kale frowned slightly. That's impossible. So we believed. Serac activated holographic footage showing massive system failures across several Imperial sectors. Human infiltration methods are highly unconventional. Their AI systems behave unpredictably compared to standard galactic protocols. The Emperor's expression darkened. Then crush their networks. We've tried. That answer finally caught Kale's full attention. The intelligence director hesitated before continuing. Human systems were designed differently from galactic standards. Less efficient in some ways, but also less vulnerable to centralized disruption. Kale slowly stood from his throne. For the first time, genuine irritation appeared in his eyes. Primitive systems should not outperform imperial technology. Serac carefully chose his next words. They weren't designed for efficiency, Your Excellency. Then what were they designed for? The director looked uneasy. Survival after catastrophic failure. That answer lingered heavily in the room, because the Dominion suddenly faced an uncomfortable realization. Human civilization had evolved under constant instability. War, disasters, political division, economic collapse. Humans expected systems to fail. so they built redundancy into everything. The Dominion, meanwhile, had enjoyed 10,000 years of dominance. Its systems were optimized for order. Human systems were optimized for chaos. And chaos was coming. Days later, the first blood was spilled. A Dominion patrol fleet intercepted a human convoy near the neutral Tarsus corridor. Officially, the patrol intended to inspect cargo for illegal military materials. Unofficially, the Dominion wanted to intimidate humanity publicly. The confrontation should have been simple. 3 human cargo ships, 1 escort frigate, against 12 Imperial warships. The outcome seemed obvious. Then the human frigate transmitted a single message. We do not recognize Dominion authority in neutral space. Imperial commanders laughed. They ordered the escort vessel to power down immediately. Instead, the human ship accelerated directly toward the Dominion formation. What happened next shocked the galaxy. The frigate detonated. Not from enemy fire. Intentionally. A hidden antimatter payload ripped through the center of the Imperial formation at point-blank range. 4 Dominion warships vanished instantly. 3 more drifted powerless with destroyed engines. The remaining vessels scattered in panic. The human cargo convoy escaped during the chaos. Across the galaxy, military analysts stared at the battle recordings in disbelief. The human captain had sacrificed his own ship without hesitation. Not for victory. For denial, to prevent submission. Inside the Imperial Palace, Kale Varos watched the footage repeatedly in growing fury. Primitive animals, he snarled. But deep down, another emotion had begun to form beneath his anger. Uncertainty. Because ancient empires understood conquest. They understood diplomacy. They understood fear. But humanity had introduced something dangerous into the equation. A species completely willing to burn itself just to stop being controlled. And history showed that such enemies were almost impossible to defeat completely. The destruction of the Dominion patrol fleet spread across the galaxy within hours. For most civilizations, the reaction was disbelief. For the Dominion, it was humiliation. A single human frigate had destroyed multiple Imperial warships in full public view. Worse, the humans had broadcast the encounter across civilian communication networks before the Dominion could suppress it. Entire star systems watched the footage repeatedly. The human escort vessel charging directly into overwhelming enemy forces. The calm final transmission from its captain. Then the blinding antimatter explosion tearing through Imperial ships that were supposed to be untouchable. To many species, the act looked insane. To others, it looked brave. And that frightened the Dominion more than the military loss itself. Inside the Imperial Senate chamber, furious voices echoed beneath towering black pillars. They attacked a Dominion fleet. This is open rebellion. Humanity must be exterminated immediately. Dozens of Imperial senators shouted over one another while Emperor Kale Varos sat silently upon his throne. His expression remained cold, but internally, rage burned like fire. For 10,000 years, no young civilization had dared strike the Dominion so openly. No species had embarrassed the Empire this way. And now the entire galaxy had seen it happen. The Emperor slowly rose. The chamber fell silent instantly. Humanity believes desperation makes them dangerous, Kale said quietly. We will teach them the difference between courage and suicide. He turned toward the High Fleet Command. Authorize Operation Iron Dominion. Several senators looked stunned. One finally spoke carefully. Your Excellency, that operation was designed for sector-wide military pacification. Kale's eyes narrowed. Exactly. The meaning became horrifyingly clear. The Dominion was no longer planning limited intimidation. This would be total war. Far away in human-controlled space, emergency alarms echoed through Bastion Command beneath the moon. Admiral Nathan Cole stood inside the tactical chamber as red warning markers spread across the holographic star map. Dominion fleets were mobilizing everywhere. Massive armadas departed Imperial shipyards. Border sectors went dark one after another. Long-range probes detected hyperspace shockwaves across dozens of systems simultaneously. General Hale stared at the growing number of enemy fleet indicators. My God! An intelligence officer swallowed nervously. They're deploying the 7th, 9th, and 12th Imperial Armada groups. Cole's face hardened. How many ships? The officer hesitated. Confirmed numbers already exceed 18,000 warships. Silence. Even hardened military veterans looked pale. Humanity possessed barely 600 combat-capable vessels, against 18,000, and those were only the confirmed fleets. President Amelia Ward entered the chamber moments later. No one needed to explain the situation. She could see it in their faces. So, she said quietly, this is it. Cole nodded. The Dominion has officially chosen war. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then, surprisingly, President Ward asked the most important question. How long do we have? An analyst answered immediately. Initial border strikes within 48 hours. Full invasion waves likely within 2 weeks. Ward inhaled slowly. Then we begin Phase Black. Several officers exchanged grim looks. Phase Black had been humanity's absolute worst-case contingency plan. Not victory. Survival. Across human space, encrypted emergency signals activated instantly. Civilian infrastructure converted to wartime production. Underground bunkers opened beneath major cities. Hidden supply depots unlocked across frontier worlds. And most shocking of all, humanity abandoned centralized command entirely. Unlike the Dominion, which relied on massive hierarchical structures, human military doctrine divided authority among independent regional fleets immediately. If Earth fell, the colonies would continue fighting. If communications failed, commanders had standing orders to operate autonomously. Human civilization fragmented itself intentionally to ensure survival. The Dominion did not yet understand what that meant. On the frontier colony of New Carthage, civilians watched enormous evacuation ships rise into orbit, while military convoys raced through crowded streets below. Fear spread everywhere. But alongside fear came determination. Families volunteered for defense construction. Factory workers refused evacuation so production lines could continue. Retired veterans returned to service without hesitation. Humanity had spent centuries telling itself that large-scale war between civilizations belonged in the past. Now reality had shattered that illusion overnight. And suddenly old instincts awakened. Survive. Protect. Fight. The same instincts that had carried humanity through every nightmare in its history. Meanwhile, inside Dominion territory, Imperial citizens celebrated. News broadcasts promised swift victory. Military analysts assured civilians that human resistance would collapse within weeks. After all, how could a primitive species possibly resist the greatest empire ever created? The Dominion had crushed advanced civilizations older than humanity itself. This war seemed almost laughably one-sided. Only a handful of observers remained deeply concerned. Among them was Ambassador Thalen of the Valari Republic. He stood inside his private observatory aboard the neutral station Aurealis, studying archived human history files again. Wars, revolutions, civil wars, world wars, economic collapses, near-extinction events. Humanity's past looked horrifying compared to most galactic civilizations. But what disturbed him most was not the violence itself. It was the pattern. Every catastrophe that should have destroyed humanity had instead transformed them into something harder, more adaptive, more dangerous. The Dominion saw a young species with limited resources. Thalen saw a civilization that had survived thousands of years under constant pressure. And pressure created monsters. His assistant entered nervously. Ambassador. Dominion fleets crossed the Tarsus border. Thalen closed the historical files slowly. Then the galaxy is about to change forever. The first invasion began exactly 36 hours later. Dominion warships emerged from hyperspace above the outer colony world of Harrow's Reach. The colony possessed no major defenses. No strategic importance. Only 2 million civilians. That was intentional. The Dominion wanted a public demonstration. Surrender immediately, or suffer annihilation. Orbital defense cannons fired desperately as Imperial fleets surrounded the planet. The resistance lasted less than 11 minutes. Then the bombardment began. Cities vanished beneath streams of plasma fire. Communication towers collapsed. Atmospheric defense grids shattered one after another. Across the galaxy, live broadcasts showed human civilians fleeing through burning streets, while Dominion announcers calmly declared, "This is the cost of resistance." The Empire expected terror. They expected humanity to beg for peace afterward. Instead, something completely different happened. Millions of humans watched heroes reach burn, and they became furious. Recruitment numbers exploded overnight. Civilian protests demanding retaliation erupted across every human colony. Even political groups previously opposed to military expansion now demanded stronger resistance. The Dominion believed overwhelming violence would break humanity's spirit. But humans had a long history with suffering. Pain did not always create surrender. Sometimes it created unity. 3 days after the fall of Harrow's Reach, the Dominion suffered its first major surprise. An Imperial supply convoy vanished near the Kepri corridor. At first, commanders suspected pirates. Then another convoy disappeared. Then another. Within a week, 17 Dominion logistics fleets had been destroyed without explanation. Panic spread through Imperial command networks. How were the humans attacking so effectively behind enemy lines? The answer shocked them. Human freighters, mining ships, civilian transports. Humanity had weaponized ordinary infrastructure. Cargo vessels suddenly deployed hidden missile batteries. Mining drones became autonomous attack swarms. Civilian communication satellites transformed into electronic warfare platforms. The Dominion struggled to identify military targets because, for humans, nearly everything could become a weapon. It was an ancient survival strategy dating back to Earth itself. When stronger enemies attacked, humans improvised. Admiral Serev of the Dominion 7th Armada slammed his fists against the tactical console in fury. This makes no sense. His officers remained silent. Another supply fleet had just vanished. No survivors. No warning. Only wreckage drifting through empty space. A tactical analyst finally spoke carefully. The humans are avoiding direct fleet engagements. Of course they are, Serev snapped. They know they would lose. Yes, Admiral. But they appear unconcerned with territorial losses. That statement changed the room's atmosphere instantly, because the Dominion suddenly realized something deeply troubling. Humanity was not fighting to hold ground. They were fighting to exhaust the Empire itself. Every destroyed convoy forced longer supply lines. Every ambush slowed invasion timetables. Every civilian uprising inside occupied systems consumed more Imperial troops. The humans retreated constantly, but each retreat cost the Dominion resources, ships, and time. And time favored the defenders, especially defenders willing to sacrifice entire worlds if necessary. Back on Earth, Admiral Cole studied fresh combat reports while exhaustion carved deep lines across his face. Human losses were catastrophic. 3 colonies destroyed, millions dead, entire fleets wiped out. But the Dominion advance had slowed dramatically already. General Hale entered the command room carrying updated projections. "You were right," he admitted quietly. Cole looked up. "The Empire depends on stability." Hale nodded grimly. "The more systems they occupy, the more vulnerable their logistics become." Cole stared at the star map silently. Humanity still faced overwhelming odds. The Dominion remained vastly stronger, but cracks had begun to appear. Tiny fractures inside an empire that had forgotten what real resistance looked like. And humanity intended to widen those cracks until the entire galactic order shattered apart. The first month of the war became known across human history as the Burning. Not because of one battle, not because of one defeat, but because entire worlds burned from orbit while humanity watched helplessly. The Dominion advanced deeper into human territory with terrifying force. Massive Imperial fleets swept across frontier systems like storms of steel and plasma. Colony defenses collapsed one after another beneath overwhelming bombardment. The ancient empire had finally stopped underestimating humanity, and now it intended to crush them completely. Above the industrial colony world of Titan's Fall, millions of civilians crowded underground shelters, while Dominion warships filled the skies overhead. Emergency sirens echoed endlessly through tunnels carved beneath the frozen surface. Children cried. Military convoys raced through packed evacuation corridors. And far above, the stars vanished behind enemy ships. Governor Elias Trent stood inside the Planetary Command bunker staring at tactical projections with hollow eyes. "We can't hold," one officer whispered. Everyone already knew it. Titan's Fall possessed only a small defense fleet and outdated orbital cannons. Against the Dominion armada now surrounding the planet, resistance was hopeless. Still, the defenders fought. Human pilots launched impossible attack runs against enemy formations. Orbital defense crews continued firing even after their stations caught fire. Civilian engineers manually repaired shield generators while bombardments shook the planet apart around them. The Dominion had expected humanity to surrender when defeat became certain. Instead, humans fought harder when cornered. That terrified Imperial commanders more than they admitted publicly. Inside the flagship Wrath of Zyrex, Dominion Fleet Admiral Seraph watched the battle unfold with growing frustration. "Why are they still resisting?" he demanded. An officer hesitated. "The humans appear unwilling to accept inevitable defeat." Seraph clenched his jaw. That answer sounded absurd. Every rational civilization surrendered once survival became impossible. But humans did not behave rationally by galactic standards. Even now, with Imperial warships tearing through orbital defenses, human fighters continued attacking relentlessly. One damaged interceptor rammed directly into a Dominion cruiser bridge after losing weapon systems. Another overloaded its reactor beside an enemy carrier formation. Human pilots kept sacrificing themselves just to slow the invasion slightly. It made no tactical sense. Yet it worked. Every act of resistance delayed the Dominion timetable. Every delay increased supply strain, and across occupied systems, resistance movements multiplied faster than Imperial forces could suppress them. Seraph turned toward communications. "Begin planetary bombardment." Several officers stiffened visibly. The Admiral noticed immediately. "You object." One younger commander answered carefully. "Orbital bombardment against civilian sectors may increase insurgency activity." Seraph's voice became ice. "The purpose is fear." Minutes later, fire rained from the sky. Entire cities vanished beneath plasma strikes. Shockwaves tore across Titan's Fall while underground shelters collapsed under the violence above. Millions died within the first hour. Across human space, the broadcasts spread instantly. And with them came rage unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. On Earth, protests disappeared overnight. Political divisions vanished. Recruitment centers overflowed beyond capacity. Old arguments about military spending, colonial independence, and ideological differences suddenly became meaningless. Because humanity realized something horrifying. The Dominion did not want obedience anymore. It wanted submission through terror. And humans had an ancient instinctive response to that kind of enemy. Fight until nothing remains. Deep beneath the Himalayas, inside one of Earth's oldest military bunkers, Admiral Nathan Cole addressed the Unified Defense Council through exhausted eyes. Harrow's Reach, Titan's Fall, New Damascus. He paused heavily. Civilian casualties now exceed 90 million. Silence filled the room. 90 million dead in 1 month. The number felt impossible. President Amelia Ward finally spoke. "The Dominion believes this will break us." Cole nodded slowly. "They don't understand humanity." General Hale activated another tactical display. Red markers spread across dozens of systems. These are confirmed insurgency attacks inside occupied territory over the last 72 hours. The room studied the numbers carefully. Hundreds of attacks, supply raids, assassinations, infrastructure sabotage, entire Imperial outposts disappearing overnight. Human resistance cells were forming faster than the Dominion could eliminate them. And unlike most galactic civilizations, humans possessed centuries of historical experience with asymmetric warfare. Occupation did not pacify humanity. Occupation radicalized it. A communications officer suddenly looked up sharply. Admiral, incoming encrypted signal from Kepri Station. Cole frowned. Kepri was overrun yesterday. That's why this is strange. The officer activated the transmission. Static filled the room briefly before a wounded human voice emerged. This is Commander Vale. Kepri resistance operational. Gunfire echoed in the background. We allowed Dominion occupation intentionally. Several officers exchanged stunned looks. Vale continued speaking quickly. They took the cities exactly as predicted, but they never detected the lower industrial sectors. A hidden holographic map appeared. Vast underground tunnels spread beneath Kepri's surface. Factories, weapons caches, power systems, entire hidden districts. Cole's eyes widened slightly. How many survivors? Over 600,000 armed civilians. The room fell silent. Kepri hadn't fallen. It had transformed. The transmission crackled again. Tell Earth. Vale coughed painfully. Tell them we're still fighting. Then the signal vanished. President Ward leaned back slowly. The Dominion thinks planets surrender when capitals fall. Cole's expression hardened. Humans don't work that way. Across occupied worlds, similar stories unfolded constantly. Dominion troops captured cities only to face endless ambushes afterward. Human civilians sabotaged infrastructure daily. Children acted as resistance couriers through maintenance tunnels Imperial scanners couldn't detect. Factory workers secretly altered production systems to create defective military equipment. Every occupation became a nightmare, because the Dominion had prepared to conquer governments, not populations. Meanwhile, deep inside neutral territory, the wider galaxy watched events with growing unease. The Dominion's brutality shocked many civilizations. Entire planets burned publicly as warnings. Civilian casualties reached catastrophic levels. And still humanity refused to surrender. If anything, they seemed more dangerous now than before the war began. Ambassador Thalen of the Valari Republic stood before the Neutral Systems Council addressing dozens of alien representatives. The Dominion expected quick victory, he warned. Instead, they have awakened something extremely dangerous. A delegate scoffed. The humans are losing. Yes, Thalen agreed quietly. And that is precisely the problem. Confused murmurs spread across the chamber. Thalen activated archived human historical footage. Earth wars, ruined cities, resistance movements, nations rebuilding after devastation. You see weakness, he explained. I see a species shaped by catastrophe. Another delegate frowned. What are you implying? Thalen's voice became grim. Humanity becomes more unified the more it suffers. The chamber grew silent, because recent intelligence reports supported his warning. Human industrial production had increased despite massive losses. Military recruitment continued rising. New fleets emerged from hidden shipyards constantly. The Dominion was destroying human worlds. Yet somehow humanity's resistance kept growing stronger. Back inside Imperial territory, Emperor Kale Varos received increasingly troubling reports. Supply losses escalating. Occupation forces stretched thin. Fleet maintenance delays spreading across multiple sectors. And perhaps worst of all, other civilizations were beginning to question Dominion invincibility. The Emperor slammed one report onto the floor. How can primitives sustain this level of resistance? No one answered immediately. Finally, Intelligence Director Serac spoke carefully. The humans decentralized everything before the war. Kale glared at him. Explain. Most civilizations rely heavily on centralized infrastructure. Capital worlds, primary command centers, core industrial hubs. Serac hesitated. Humanity distributed those systems across hundreds of independent locations. Kale slowly realized the implication. Destroying one colony barely slowed overall production. Eliminating leadership changed little because regional commanders operated independently already. Even communication blackouts failed because human units expected isolation. Human civilization functioned like a living organism damaged repeatedly throughout evolution. It adapted around injuries automatically. The Dominion, meanwhile, functioned like a machine, powerful, efficient, but increasingly vulnerable when key systems failed. Serac activated another classified report. There is additional concern. Kale's patience was gone. What now? The intelligence director swallowed carefully. Human counteroffensives have begun. The Emperor froze slightly. That's impossible. They're retreating everywhere. Yes, Your Excellency. Publicly, a holographic map appeared. Several small Dominion outposts had vanished entirely along remote sectors. Then another map. Destroyed logistics stations. Ambushed patrol fleets. Missing communications relays. Not major victories. Something far worse. Systematic disruption. Humanity was no longer trying to stop the Empire head-on. They were bleeding it slowly. And the bleeding had just begun. Far beyond the front lines, hidden inside an asteroid field near the dead system of Orpheus 9, thousands of human ships drifted silently in darkness. Not warships, not officially, mining vessels, cargo carriers, civilian transports, but beneath their hulls, hidden weapons activated one by one. Massive rail cannons unfolded from disguised compartments. Missile bays opened. Drone swarms powered online. At the center of the fleet stood Admiral Cole aboard the carrier Resolute Dawn. He stared at the tactical display silently while officers prepared attack calculations. General Hale entered beside him. The Dominion believes we're collapsing. Cole nodded. Good. Civilian casualties will keep rising if we continue delaying. Cole's expression darkened painfully. He knew that already. Every hour bought preparation time. But every hour also cost lives. Still, direct confrontation now would destroy humanity completely. So they endured and prepared. Hale looked toward the hidden fleet. When do we strike? Cole finally answered. When the Empire stops seeing us as prey. He looked toward the growing list of Dominion fleet positions. Because that's the moment they become vulnerable. And somewhere deep inside Imperial territory, cracks were already beginning to spread beneath the weight of a war the Dominion no longer fully understood. The Dominion had expected humanity to break. That expectation was becoming increasingly expensive. Across multiple sectors, Imperial command centers reported the same unsettling pattern. Human forces did not behave like a collapsing civilization. They behaved like something reorganizing itself under pressure. Each loss made them harder to predict. Each defeat made them more coordinated, and each occupation created more resistance. Inside the Imperial War Council aboard Virulon Prime, the atmosphere had shifted from confidence to irritation, and now toward something far more dangerous. Concern. Admiral Serev stood before a vast holographic map showing the frontier sectors. Red zones marked Dominion control. Black regions marked contested space. Too many black regions were appearing. This is not resistance, Serev said coldly. This is coordination. A younger strategist shook his head. That is impossible. The humans have no central command structure capable of coordinating across multiple occupied systems. Serev turned sharply. Then explain why every convoy we send into their territory disappears in the same pattern. Silence. The data was undeniable. Human attacks were no longer random. They were synchronized, predictable in their unpredictability. It was as if someone had studied the Dominion's logistical doctrine and designed a war specifically to exploit it. Emperor Kale Varos watched quietly from his throne as the argument unfolded. Finally, he spoke. Show me the human losses. A tactical officer immediately complied. A separate hologram appeared. Entire human systems marked in crimson. Destroyed colonies. Burned infrastructure. Civilian casualties still rising. Over 140 million confirmed dead, the officer said carefully. A few senators nodded with grim satisfaction. Good, one muttered. They are weakening. But Serev did not look satisfied. He switched the display. Now show Dominion losses. The room went silent again. Supply fleets destroyed. Outposts abandoned. ships missing or unaccounted for. Occupation forces stretched across impossible distances. Then something more disturbing. A steady increase in fleet maintenance failures, communication disruptions, delayed reinforcements, logistical bottlenecks spreading like infection. The Dominion was still far stronger militarily, but it was becoming less stable. Kale's expression slowly tightened. "This is not acceptable." Sarav nodded. "That is why I recommend escalation." The Emperor leaned forward slightly. "Define escalation." The Admiral hesitated just long enough to reveal the seriousness of what he was about to propose. "Target their core worlds directly." A wave of discomfort spread through the chamber. Even hardened war commanders shifted uneasily. Humanity's core worlds meant Earth and its primary industrial systems. A direct strike there would not just be military action. It would be existential war. Kale studied the tactical projections for a long moment. Then he nodded once. "Approved." Far away, in human space, Admiral Nathan Cole stood inside the Resolute Dawn's command deck watching encrypted battlefield updates. The human fleet was no longer hiding. Over the past week, scattered strikes had intensified into something more deliberate. Dominion supply convoys were being systematically targeted. Communication relays were being erased. And most concerning, entire Imperial battle groups were being lured into empty sectors and destroyed through coordinated ambushes. General Marcus Hale reviewed the latest engagement report. "They're adapting faster than expected." Cole didn't look up. "They've realized we're not trying to win battles." Hale frowned. "Then what are we doing?" Cole finally turned. "Making their empire bleed slowly enough to feel it." A pause. "And fast enough to matter." The strategy was brutal in its simplicity. Humanity could not defeat the Dominion in direct warfare. But the Dominion could not sustain endless attrition across thousands of systems. Especially not against an enemy that treated every civilian system as a potential weapon platform. Hale looked at him carefully. "And when they finally realized that?" Cole's answer came immediately. "Then they escalate." As if on cue, alarms sounded across the bridge. A communications officer looked up sharply. "Admiral, emergency transmission from Earth." The room stiffened instantly. Earth had remained relatively shielded until now, protected by layered defense fleets and hidden deterrent systems. Cole stepped forward. "Put it through." Static filled the screen briefly. Then President Amelia Ward appeared, her expression controlled but tense. "Admiral Cole," she said, "we have confirmed Dominion fleet movement toward Seoul." Silence fell over the bridge. Hale exhaled slowly. "So it begins." Ward continued. "Multiple Imperial armadas. Estimated strength exceeds anything they've deployed so far." Cole studied the projection forming beside her image. Massive fleet formations converging. Not probing attacks. Not border pressure. A direct invasion vector toward humanity's heart. Ward's voice lowered slightly. "They are coming for Earth." Cole nodded once. "Understood." The transmission ended. For a moment nobody spoke. Then Hale broke the silence. "If Earth falls." Cole cut him off. "It won't." But even as he said it, he knew the truth was more complicated. Earth was not just a planet. It was the symbolic core of humanity. Its loss would not end the war, but it would change everything about how it was fought. Across human space, emergency protocols activated instantly. Hidden fleets began converging toward Seoul. Civilian evacuation routes were secured. Deep space weapons platforms activated after decades of silence. And beneath Earth's surface, systems humanity had never publicly acknowledged came online. Weapons built during earlier existential crises. Weapons designed not for conquest, but for ending invasions permanently. Meanwhile, the Dominion fleets advanced confidently. They had analyzed human defenses extensively. Earth was protected, yes, but not enough. The Empire believed that once the human core world fell, resistance across the galaxy would collapse rapidly. A single decisive blow. That was the plan. Inside the flagship Eternal Dominion, Admiral Sarav reviewed final invasion parameters. Enemy fleet concentration detected near Mars orbit, an officer reported. Sarov nodded. Good. They will attempt to defend in space. Another officer added. Planetary defense grid remains active but uncoordinated. Sarov smirked. Then we will coordinate it for them. He activated the invasion sequence. Begin planetary assault. The first wave entered Sol system like a storm. Hundreds of Dominion warships emerged from hyperspace in staggered formations, immediately deploying fighter swarms and orbital bombardment platforms. Human defensive fleets responded instantly. Space around Mars erupted into chaos. Missiles crossed empty voids. Energy beams carved through hulls. Explosions lit up orbital space like artificial stars. But the Dominion had not come unprepared. Their formations adapted rapidly, cutting through human resistance lines with overwhelming firepower. On Earth's surface, global alerts activated. For the first time in modern history, every human nation responded under unified command protocols. Admiral Cole watched the battle unfold in real time from multiple fronts. Human fleets were holding. Barely. But they were holding. General Hale looked at him. We can't sustain this. Cole nodded. I know. Then what's the plan? Cole stared at the projection of Earth for a long moment. Then he spoke quietly. We stop reacting. Pause. And start deciding how this war ends. Above Earth, the battle intensified. Dominion fleets pressed forward. Human defenses tightened. And somewhere deep within the structure of human command, something new was being activated. A contingency the Dominion had never accounted for. Not because it was secret, but because no empire in history had ever considered that a species might willingly design its own battlefield around its home world, just to ensure the invader could never leave it intact. And as the first phase of the Sol invasion escalated beyond containment, both sides began to realize the same terrifying truth. This was no longer a war for territory. It was becoming a war for survival of identity itself. The battle for Sol system was supposed to be decisive. That was the Dominion's belief. It was also the first time in 10,000 years the Empire had walked directly into a trap it did not recognize until it was already closing. Above Earth's orbit, the space around Mars turned into a shattered battlefield. Dominion warships advanced in disciplined formations, their shields absorbing human counterfire with calculated efficiency. Human fleets, though smaller, fought with desperate precision. Every engagement followed a pattern that confused Imperial tacticians. Humans did not defend territory in traditional ways. They defended time. Every minute the Dominion spent advancing deeper into Sol system, human resistance grew more organized, more coordinated, and more aggressive. Admiral Sarov noticed it immediately. Something was wrong. His flagship sensors showed increasing human fleet activity instead of decreasing resistance. That is not possible, he muttered. An officer leaned over the tactical display. Enemy production output in system appears to be increasing. Sarov turned sharply. Increasing? Yes, Admiral. We are detecting fresh vessels entering combat zones every few minutes. That should not have been happening. Human fleet reinforcements should have been diminishing under sustained orbital pressure, not multiplying. Sarov activated deeper scans. What he saw made no sense at first. Human ships were not coming from deep space. They were coming from everywhere. Lunar orbit, asteroid stations, hidden industrial platforms, subsurface launch sites on Earth itself. The Dominion had assumed Earth was a single defended target. It wasn't. It was a fortress layered in thousands of hidden operational systems. And those systems had just gone active. On Earth, Admiral Nathan Cole stood inside the Sol Command bunker beneath the Atlantic Ocean. The room was silent except for the constant stream of battlefield data updates. General Hale studied the readouts carefully. They breached Mars Orbit Defense Line 3, he said. Cole nodded without emotion. Expected. Pause. And Line 4? Still holding. Cole finally looked up. Good. That means they're committing deeper. Hale frowned. That's not a good thing. Cole's voice was steady. It is if you want them inside the net. Across Earth's surface, something unprecedented was happening. Entire civilian industries had been converted into decentralized war production nodes. Factories were no longer just manufacturing centers. They were autonomous defense contributors. Mining operations had been repurposed into orbital ammunition supply chains. Even agricultural systems had been integrated into logistical support networks. Humanity had transformed its entire planet into a distributed war machine. Not centralized, not hierarchical, distributed. The Dominion had expected Earth to be a single strategic point. Instead, it was thousands of independent systems working in parallel. That difference was beginning to matter. In orbit, Sarev received a new report. Human fleet activity near lunar surface has tripled in the last hour. He narrowed his eyes. Lunar surface? Yes, Admiral. Impossible. We secured lunar space early in the engagement. Another officer hesitated. Sir, we may have missed something. Before Sarev could respond, alarms erupted across the bridge. A Dominion supply carrier exploded silently near lunar orbit. Then another. Then 3 more in rapid succession. No warning. No engagement detection. Just sudden, precise destruction. Sarev slammed his hand on the console. Where are they coming from? A tactical officer responded quickly. Multiple vectors, Admiral. Subsurface launch platforms on the moon. That statement caused confusion for a moment. Then realization spread slowly. Humanity had built weapons infrastructure beneath the moon itself. Hidden, dormant, waiting. The Dominion had been fighting above it without realizing what was below. Sarev's expression darkened. They turned the entire system into a minefield. Far below, inside the Lunar Command Network, human engineers coordinated launches in silence. No celebration, no panic, just execution of long-prepared contingency protocols. Each hidden platform activated only once, fired once, then self-destructed to avoid detection. It was inefficient. It was expensive. But it ensured one thing. No Imperial fleet could safely assume any part of Sol system was inactive. On Earth, President Amelia Ward stood in the underground command hall watching live orbital feeds. Explosions lit up space above the planet. Yet the Dominion still kept advancing. They're not retreating, she said quietly. Cole stood beside her. They won't. Ward looked at him. Even after this? Cole nodded. The Empire doesn't see this as a trap yet. General Hale added grimly. They still think Earth is a prize. Cole's expression hardened. It's not. A new tactical update appeared on the display. Dominion fleets were now fully inside Inner Sol system. Mars orbit had fallen into partial control. Lunar space was contested but unstable. Earth was next. Sarev reviewed the updated battlefield map. Prepare planetary invasion vectors, he ordered. We are deploying ground forces? Yes. An officer hesitated. Admiral, human resistance on planetary surface is still unknown in scale. Sarev turned slowly. That is irrelevant. A pause. We will break their home world. The order went out. Dominion drop fleets began deploying invasion pods. Thousands of armored descent units entered Earth's atmosphere. At the same time, orbital bombardment platforms increased firing frequency. Cities across the planet were about to experience direct assault. Inside Sol Command, alarms intensified. Cole studied the incoming trajectories. They've committed to ground invasion. Ward looked at him sharply. Can we stop them in orbit? Cole paused. We can slow them. That's not what I asked. Cole met her eyes. Then no. Silence filled the room. Ward exhaled slowly. So Earth falls. Cole shook his head. No. He turned toward the tactical display. We transitioned to Phase 2. Hale frowned. That phase was never meant for activation. Cole's voice was firm. It was always going to be activated. The only question was when. Across Earth, hidden systems began unlocking. Deep within mountain ranges, sealed military installations reopened after decades of silence. Under oceans, dormant weapons arrays activated. In orbit, concealed platforms detached from camouflage fields and revealed their true structure. And for the first time, the Dominion realized something critical. Earth was not just defended. It was layered. Every attack they launched triggered responses from deeper defensive layers. Every victory created a new problem they had not anticipated. Sarav watched the battlefield shift in confusion. "We are being drawn inward," he said slowly. A tactical analyst nodded nervously. "Yes, Admiral." "To where?" The analyst hesitated. "Toward the planet." Sarav froze slightly. For the first time in the war, uncertainty entered his voice. "Why would they want us closer to the surface?" No one answered immediately, because the answer was beginning to reveal itself in the data. Human defenses were not trying to stop the invasion at maximum range. They were allowing it to progress deeper. Every destroyed fleet opened space for another layer of human defense. Every advance reduced Dominion mobility. The Empire was still winning battles, but it was slowly losing strategic freedom of movement. And that meant something dangerous was happening. They were being guided, not pushed back. Guided. On Earth, Cole finally activated the final Sol System defense layer. A network of synchronized orbital platforms aligned across planetary orbit. General Hale looked at the readouts. "This will turn the entire system into a kill zone." Cole nodded. "That's the point." Ward stared at the display. "And Earth?" Cole was silent for a moment. Then he said the words that defined the next phase of the war. "Earth stops being a target." A pause. "It becomes the battlefield." Above them, Dominion invasion pods entered final descent. Below them, humanity prepared for a fight that would decide whether the galaxy's oldest empire had just made a fatal assumption about what it meant to invade a species that had never stopped preparing for extinction. The moment Dominion invasion pods entered Earth's atmosphere, the war stopped being about space superiority. It became about survival inside a closed system where every layer had been prepared long before the first Imperial ship arrived. And the Dominion finally realized something unsettling. They were no longer invading Earth. They were entering it. Above the planet, orbital space was no longer a battlefield of open maneuvering. It had transformed into a collapsing grid of controlled engagements. Every Dominion fleet movement triggered coordinated human responses that felt less like defense and more like containment. Admiral Sarav watched the tactical map with growing unease. Human fleets were not trying to break his formations. They were shaping them. "Why are our vectors being restricted?" he demanded. A tactical officer checked the data twice. "Admiral, human forces are deliberately avoiding full engagement." Sarav turned sharply. "That makes no sense. They are losing ships faster than we are." The officer hesitated. "Yes, but every engagement forces us closer to planetary orbit." Silence. That statement landed heavily. Sarav slowly looked at the orbital map again. The Dominion fleets were indeed converging toward Earth's surface. Not because of direct human firepower pressure, but because of movement constraints created by layered defensive zones. It wasn't brute force. It was geometry. Humanity was shaping the battlefield itself. Inside Sol Command, Admiral Nathan Cole stood before a holographic projection of Earth's upper atmosphere. Thousands of incoming Dominion descent pods burned through atmospheric entry corridors. General Hale studied the wave patterns. "They've launched full ground invasion," he said. Cole nodded once. "Then Phase 3 begins." Hale frowned. "There's a Phase 3? Cole didn't answer immediately. Instead, he activated a deeper layer of the planetary defense network. Hidden markers appeared beneath Earth's surface. Massive underground structures. Reactor-linked defense systems, prepositioned autonomous strike platforms, and something far more disturbing, self-sustaining warfare infrastructure embedded across all continents. Hale stared at the display. This was never in any public defense doctrine. Cole's voice was quiet. It wasn't public. A pause. It was contingency architecture built over centuries. Ward stepped forward slowly. "You mean humanity prepared for planetary invasion before we ever left the solar system?" Cole nodded. "We prepared for extinction scenarios, not because we expected them, but because history told us not to assume safety. On the surface, the first Dominion ground forces landed. Armored descent pods crashed into deserts, oceans, and abandoned industrial zones across Earth. Within minutes, Imperial troops deployed in coordinated formations, expecting fragmented resistance. At first, the planet seemed quiet. Too quiet. Then the ground responded. In North Africa, entire desert regions activated buried energy grids that turned sand into electromagnetic disruption fields. In the Pacific, submerged platforms surfaced silently beneath Dominion landing zones, releasing autonomous combat drones. In Siberia, frozen terrain collapsed into hidden subterranean corridors where human forces had been waiting in sealed readiness for decades. The Dominion ground commanders quickly adjusted. "This is standard insurgency containment," one officer reported. "We proceed with systematic clearance." But the scale was wrong. Far too large for insurgency. Far too coordinated for scattered resistance. As Imperial units advanced, they began encountering resistance nodes that should not have existed simultaneously. Not just soldiers, entire localized command ecosystems. Human forces were not reacting to invasion. They were activating around it. And every engagement drew Dominion troops deeper into controlled zones. Inside orbit, Serev received urgent updates. Admiral ground forces are encountering layered resistance structures. He narrowed his eyes. Define layered. The officer hesitated. It appears the planet is segmented into pre-designed combat zones. Silence followed. Then Serev slowly stood. That is not possible. But reports kept coming. Every Imperial advance triggered collapse points ahead. Bridges that became ambush corridors. Cities that turned into controlled kill zones. Underground tunnel systems that redirected entire battalions into isolated pockets. Humanity was not defending Earth. It was actively guiding the invasion force into predetermined operational grids. Serev finally understood the implication. They let us land. A subordinate looked confused. Admiral, Serev's voice darkened. They allowed orbital breach. They allowed atmospheric entry. They are controlling our descent patterns. He turned sharply toward the tactical display. We are not invading Earth. A pause. We are inside its battlefield architecture. Inside Sol Command, Cole watched as the full planetary map lit up with synchronized activity. Ward studied it in disbelief. This is coordinated across every continent. Cole nodded. Every major landmass, every ocean zone, every atmospheric layer. Hale exhaled slowly. How long have we had this prepared? Cole's answer was simple. Long before we knew the Dominion existed. Silence filled the command center. Ward looked at him carefully. So this wasn't built for them specifically. Cole shook his head. It was built for anyone. A pause. Because eventually someone would come. On Earth's surface, Dominion forces realized too late that their advantage was evaporating. They still outgunned human ground units. They still held technological superiority in many areas. But they had lost operational freedom. Every movement triggered consequences. Every advancement narrowed their options. Every victory pulled them deeper into systems they did not control. And worse, they could not easily retreat. Because the same planetary structure that guided them inward also restricted exit routes. Admiral Serev reviewed casualty reports. Imperial losses were rising faster than projected. But what disturbed him more was the pattern. This is not resistance, he muttered. A tactical officer responded carefully. Then what is it, Admiral? Serev stared at the display for a long moment. Containment. The word hung in the air, because containment implied intent. Not defense. Not survival. Design. Meanwhile, deep underground in North America's Central Command node, human ground commanders coordinated global engagement grids. Colonel Mira Khan watched real-time battlefield segmentation data. They're committing deeper into Zone Delta, she said. A systems analyst nodded. Exactly as predicted. Another officer glanced at her. And if they break through Delta? Mira Khan didn't hesitate. They won't. A pause. Because Delta was never meant to be broken. Across Earth, the planetary battlefield tightened further. Dominion forces found themselves unable to concentrate strength in any single direction without exposing flanks elsewhere. Human resistance never attempted to match Imperial strength head-on. Instead, it redistributed pressure constantly. The Dominion was still powerful, but it was no longer able to bring that power to bear efficiently. Inside orbit, Seraph finally issued a new directive. Begin planetary-wide orbital bombardment. An officer hesitated. Admiral, that would risk civilian planetary collapse. Seraph's expression hardened. Do it. The bombardment began. Energy strikes descended toward Earth in massive coordinated waves. But before they reached the surface, something unexpected happened. Orbital interception systems activated from previously undetected positions. Hundreds, then thousands. Human platforms hidden in orbital debris fields, lunar shadows, and asteroid fragments began intercepting incoming fire. The sky above Earth turned into a layered storm of destruction and counter-destruction. Seraph stared at the chaos in disbelief. They hid weapons in orbital debris? A tactical officer nodded slowly. Yes, Admiral. A long pause. Seraph finally whispered the realization forming in his mind. This entire system was never meant to be defended. He looked again at the battlefield. And for the first time since the war began, the Dominion Admiral understood something deeply uncomfortable. Earth was not reacting to invasion. Earth was completing it. And somewhere beneath the surface, humanity was still waiting for the next phase of a war that was no longer about survival alone, but about controlling how the strongest empire in the galaxy would collapse inside its own conquest. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Galactic Dominion was not advancing. It was bleeding inside a system it could not fully control. Earth was no longer just a battlefield. It had become a pressure chamber, and the Dominion was inside it. Orbital space above Earth remained in violent motion. Imperial warships attempted to stabilize formations, but every coordinated movement triggered new interceptions from hidden human platforms. What should have been a dominant orbital occupation had turned into fragmented control zones. Admiral Seraph watched the tactical map in growing silence. Red Imperial markers still outnumbered human positions, but the pattern had changed. He could see it clearly now. The Dominion was no longer dictating movement. It was reacting to it. That's impossible, one officer muttered. We still control orbital superiority. Seraph didn't answer immediately, because technically the officer was correct. They still had more ships, more firepower, more advanced systems, but none of that mattered if they could not move freely. And humanity had ensured exactly that. Inside Sol Command, Admiral Nathan Cole observed the evolving battlefield with a calm that masked the scale of what was unfolding. General Hale studied incoming reports. Ground zones Gamma and Delta have merged resistance control, he said. Cole nodded. Expected. Ward leaned forward slightly. Expected. Cole finally looked at her. The moment they committed ground forces, they lost the ability to isolate regions. Hale frowned. That sounds like a good thing for them. Cole shook his head. It would be, if the terrain wasn't designed to connect under pressure. A pause. Ward slowly realized what he meant. The more they advance, the more connected their opposition becomes, Cole finished. On Earth's surface, Dominion ground commanders were encountering increasing resistance complexity. What began as scattered human defense cells had evolved into synchronized operational networks. Cities were no longer individual targets. They were nodes. When one node was attacked, surrounding regions adjusted instantly. When one supply line was destroyed, alternative systems activated within minutes. It was not centralized command. It was adaptive coordination. A living system responding to invasion in real time. On the war-torn continent of Asia Delta, Dominion armored divisions pushed into what appeared to be abandoned urban zones. No civilians, no resistance, no movement. Seraph reviewed the data from orbit. Why is Zone 7 quiet? He asked. A tactical analyst checked readings. Scans indicate minimal life signs. Seraph narrowed his eyes. That is not a retreat pattern. Before anyone could respond, the answer revealed itself violently. Entire city blocks activated simultaneously. Buildings that had appeared empty transformed into fortified structures. Roadways collapsed into controlled kill corridors. Subterranean launch systems deployed autonomous defense drones in synchronized waves. The Dominion forces inside the zone were sealed in within minutes. Seraph watched the engagement unfold with growing tension. "This is not improvisation," he said slowly. A senior commander nodded grimly. "No, Admiral. This is architecture." The word changed the tone in the room. Architecture implied design, planning, intentional structure built long before the battle began. Seraph turned toward the broader map. "How long have they been preparing this planet?" No one answered, because the uncomfortable implication was becoming unavoidable. Humanity had not just built defenses. They had built a system designed to function under invasion conditions. Inside Sol Command, Ward stared at the data streams. "How deep does this go?" she asked quietly. Cole didn't hesitate. "All the way down." Hale looked up. "You mean?" Cole nodded. "Every layer we expose creates another layer beneath it." Silence filled the command center. Ward's voice lowered. "So there's no final line of defense?" Cole's answer was immediate. "There is." A pause. "But it's not where they think it is." Above Earth, Dominion orbital forces attempted a coordinated breakthrough. If they could reestablish dominance in orbit, ground forces could be reinforced and reorganized. Seraph issued the order. "Concentrate fire on northern orbital grid. We break their interception net." Massive Imperial fleets repositioned. For a brief moment, it seemed like the Dominion might regain control. Then humanity activated Layer 4. Hidden systems across lunar orbit synchronized instantly. Instead of intercepting incoming fire, they stopped defending entirely and began attacking orbital structure points directly. Not ships, not formations, but the gravitational stability anchors holding Imperial fleet formations together. Within minutes, Dominion formations began losing cohesion. Ships drifted out of coordinated range. Communication delays increased. Tactical synchronization degraded. Seraph slammed his fist against the console. "They're dismantling formation integrity," a subordinate shouted back. "They're targeting our coordination systems, not our ships." That was the moment realization fully set in. Humanity was not trying to destroy the Dominion fleet. They were trying to make it incapable of functioning as a fleet. Inside Earth's underground command layers, Cole watched the results unfold. Hale studied the new projections. "They're fragmenting." Cole nodded. "Exactly." Ward looked between them. "And once they fragment?" Cole's expression remained steady. "Then they become local problems instead of an empire." A pause. "And local problems can be contained." Across orbit, Seraph finally understood the direction of the war. "This is not defense," he said quietly. No one responded, because they were beginning to understand it too. Humanity was not resisting conquest. It was restructuring the conqueror's ability to exist as a unified force. The Dominion still had power, but it was losing coherence. And an empire without coherence was just scattered strength waiting to be isolated. Then came the second shock. Multiple Dominion fleets reported sudden communication blackouts. Entire battle groups went silent in real time. At first, Seraph assumed sabotage. Then intelligence reports confirmed something worse. Human signal disruption systems were not jamming communication. They were rewriting it. Messages between Dominion fleets were arriving altered. Orders were delayed. Coordinates desynchronized. Some fleets even received conflicting commands simultaneously. Seraph stared at the data in disbelief. "They're attacking our decision chain." A strategist responded cautiously. "That would require access to Imperial encryption architecture." Seraph turned slowly. "Which they should not have." A pause. "Unless," his expression darkened. "They've been studying us since first contact." Inside Sol Command, Cole observed the communications interference effects carefully. Hale noticed his focus. You expected this? Cole nodded. They had to do it eventually. Ward frowned. Do what? Cole pointed at the communication disruption grid. Break their unity. A pause. Because once an empire can no longer coordinate itself, it stops being an empire. Above Earth, Dominion commanders began experiencing escalating confusion. Orders conflicted across command layers. Fleet coordination broke down between sectors. Ground forces received delayed or incorrect orbital support data. The Dominion still possessed overwhelming strength. But it could no longer apply that strength consistently. And worse, the humans were accelerating pressure. Seraph finally issued a rare directive. Fall back to perimeter stabilization. An officer hesitated. Admiral, withdrawal under current conditions may be difficult. Seraph's voice hardened. I didn't say retreat. A pause. I said stabilize. But even as he spoke, he knew stability was already slipping away. Because every attempt the Dominion made to regain control only revealed another layer of human preparation designed to prevent it. And deep inside Imperial command networks, something unprecedented began to spread. Doubt. Not fear of humanity's weapons, but fear of humanity's understanding. Because it was becoming increasingly clear that this war was not unfolding randomly. It was unfolding exactly as if humanity had already studied how the Dominion would respond, long before the first shot was ever fired. Empires do not collapse suddenly. They unravel in layers. And the Dominion, for the first time in 10,000 years, was beginning to feel the threads loosen under its grip. Above Earth, what was once a unified invasion force had fractured into dozens of semi-independent battle clusters. Communication delays had turned into strategic isolation. Fleet coordination, once instantaneous, now required multiple relays that were increasingly unreliable. Admiral Seraph stood in the dim light of the command deck, watching the battlefield projection flicker with inconsistencies. Entire Dominion formations were no longer responding. Not destroyed, not retreating, just disconnected. That shouldn't be possible, one officer said quietly. Seraph didn't respond immediately, because the data was no longer surprising him. It was confirming something worse. Humanity wasn't just resisting. It was dismantling the structure that made resistance even necessary. Inside Sol Command, Admiral Nathan Cole observed the shifting battle grid with a focus that had not changed since the first shots were fired. General Hale studied casualty projections. Dominion coordination efficiency has dropped below 60%, he reported. Cole nodded once. And ground forces? Ward answered from the side console. Still advancing in some sectors, but isolated. Hale frowned. So they're still winning locally. Cole corrected him immediately. They're still fighting locally. A pause. That's not the same thing. Ward looked at him carefully. Then what is it? Cole turned toward the central projection of Earth. The difference between occupying territory and controlling it. Silence followed, because everyone in the room understood what that implied. The Dominion was still physically present on Earth, but its ability to act as a unified occupying force was collapsing. On the surface, Dominion ground commanders were beginning to notice something deeply unsettling. Every time they secured an area, resistance reappeared elsewhere almost instantly. Every time they destroyed a human command node, 3 more emerged in different configurations. It was not endless manpower. It was systemic redundancy. Humanity had built itself to survive partial destruction. And now that design was being tested at planetary scale. In orbit, Seraph received a new report that made him pause longer than usual. Admiral, we are detecting structural anomalies in our fleet coordination grid. He narrowed his eyes. Define anomalies. The officer hesitated. Ships are receiving outdated tactical data. Some are acting on conflicting coordinates. Others are no longer receiving centralized orders at all. Seraph slowly turned toward the display. That's not interference. A pause. That's fragmentation. A senior strategist spoke carefully. If command cohesion continues to degrade, we risk losing fleet-level control entirely. Sarev's voice was quiet. We already are. Inside Earth's underground command network, Cole activated a deeper layer of operational control. Hale watched as new markers appeared across the planetary map. What are those? He asked. Cole didn't look away from the display. Separation nodes. Ward frowned. Separation from what? Cole finally answered. From each other. The meaning became clear a moment later. Human strategy was not focused on destroying Dominion forces directly. It was focused on ensuring they could no longer function as a unified system. Every node activated on Earth's battlefield created controlled isolation zones in space. Every disrupted link reduced Imperial fleet cohesion. Every broken chain made the Dominion less capable of coordinated response. Hale exhaled slowly. So we're not pushing them out. Cole nodded. We're breaking them apart. Above Earth, Sarev finally ordered full system diagnostic protocols. Run complete fleet synchronization check. The results came back slower than expected. Then inconsistently. Then incompletely. A junior officer stared at the output in confusion. Admiral, multiple fleet groups are no longer reporting through central command channels. Sarev's expression darkened. How many? The officer hesitated. Too many. Silence filled the bridge. Because too many was not a military statistic. It was an admission of systemic failure. For the first time since the war began, Sarev spoke without certainty. Show me the human command structure. A tactical overlay appeared. Or rather, attempted to. What appeared on the display was not a single centralized network. It was a distributed pattern of independent nodes operating in parallel. No single point of failure. No single command center. No single dependency chain. Sarev studied it for a long moment. Then he whispered the realization forming in his mind. There is no head to cut off. Inside Sol Command, Ward watched the same pattern from Earth's perspective. They built their military like an empire, she said quietly. Cole nodded. And we didn't. Hale looked between them. What did we build it like then? Cole answered without hesitation. A species that expects things to break. A pause. And keeps functioning anyway. Above Earth, Dominion forces attempted a coordinated regrouping maneuver. 3 major fleet clusters attempted to reconnect through orbital relay points. For a brief moment, synchronization appeared to stabilize. Then human disruption systems activated Layer 5. Not destruction. Not interception. Reconfiguration. Orbital relay nodes began altering signal routing dynamically, redirecting Imperial fleet communications through shifting pathways that constantly changed structure. The Dominion was still communicating, but not reliably. Sarev slammed his fist against the console. They're rewriting our coordination topology in real time. A strategist responded urgently. Admiral, if this continues, we may lose cross-sector command capability entirely. Sarev turned sharply. Then restore it. A pause. How? No one answered immediately, because the answer was increasingly unclear. The Dominion could overpower human fleets in direct combat. But it could not fight an enemy that was systematically dismantling the logic of its command structure. On Earth, Cole observed incoming reports. Hale studied the updates carefully. They're adapting, he said. Cole nodded. They always would. Ward looked at him. Then what's next? Cole didn't hesitate. The point where adaptation stops being enough. Above Earth, Dominion fleets attempted one final structural correction. They concentrated power into a unified strike formation aimed directly at Sol Command's predicted command node. If humanity's coordination center could be eliminated, systemic control might be restored. Sarev issued the order. Converge all remaining synchronized fleets on Sol Command's origin vector. For a moment, it looked like the Dominion might regain initiative. Then humanity revealed Phase 6, and the battlefield stopped behaving like a war and started behaving like a system designed to conclude itself. The Dominion's final convergence order should have ended the war. In every previous conflict across 10,000 years of galactic expansion, this moment was decisive. When an empire concentrated its remaining strength into a single strike, resistance collapsed. Coordination returned. Order was restored. But Earth was not responding like a conquered system. It was responding like a closing trap. Above the planet, thousands of Dominion warships began their final synchronized maneuver toward the Sol Command projected location. Fleet formations tightened. Energy arrays charged. Invasion units prepared for full planetary suppression. Admiral Serev stood motionless, staring at the tactical grid. Something felt wrong. Not tactically, structurally. The human responses were no longer defensive in the traditional sense. They were predictive. Every Dominion movement was met not with resistance, but with prepositioned counterstructures that seemed to already exist before the orders were issued. "That's impossible," Serev whispered. A strategist beside him answered quietly. "Admiral, it's happening across all sectors simultaneously." Serev turned sharply. "All sectors?" The officer nodded. "Yes, not just Earth. Every human-controlled system is showing the same pattern." Silence fell across the bridge, because the implication was clear. This was no longer a planetary defense. It was a species-wide doctrine. Inside Sol Command, Admiral Nathan Cole watched the final phase unfold without emotion. General Hale studied the incoming fleet trajectories. "They committed everything," he said. Cole nodded. "Good." Ward looked between them. "You expected this?" Cole didn't answer immediately. Then he spoke. "They always commit everything when they believe they've found the center." A pause. "The mistake is believing there is one." On Earth's orbital perimeter, Dominion fleets entered final engagement range. Serev issued the last escalation order. "Begin total system suppression. Eliminate all resistance nodes." The order echoed across fragmented fleet channels. But something changed. For the first time in the entire war, multiple Dominion units failed to acknowledge synchronization confirmation. Then more. Then entire fleet clusters stopped responding to centralized command protocols entirely. Serev's eyes narrowed. "Report." A communications officer hesitated. "Admiral, we are receiving conflicting command sources." "That's interference." "No, sir." A pause. "It's internal." Serev slowly turned. "What do you mean internal?" The officer swallowed. "Some fleet groups are no longer accepting Imperial command signatures. They are defaulting to local authority protocols." Silence. Then realization spread across the bridge like ice. The Dominion was fracturing from within its own command architecture. Not because systems were destroyed, but because they no longer agreed on what command meant. Humanity had not just attacked ships. It had attacked coherence. Inside Sol Command, alarms remained steady, but the battlefield outside was collapsing into structured isolation zones. Hale looked at the projection. "They're splitting into autonomous clusters," he said. Cole nodded. "Exactly." Ward frowned. "That means they're still dangerous." Cole agreed. "Yes." A pause. "But no longer unified." Above Earth, Serev finally understood the scale of what they were facing. "This is not a war," he said quietly. No one responded, because everyone knew what was coming next. Serev continued. "This is dismantling." A tactical officer spoke carefully. "Admiral, should we attempt retreat coordination?" Serev looked at him for a long moment, then answered simply, "There is no coordination left to retreat with." Outside the flagship, Dominion fleets attempted withdrawal sequences, but routes no longer aligned. Some fleets moved toward extraction points that were no longer synchronized with others. Others attempted emergency jumps into hyperspace lanes that were already destabilized by human interference layers. Confusion spread rapidly, and confusion in war is more dangerous than enemy fire, because it removes control. Inside Earth's atmosphere, Dominion ground forces began receiving incomplete orbital support, then delayed support, then contradictory instructions. Some units were ordered to advance, others to hold position, others to retreat simultaneously. Entire battalions froze in place, unable to determine valid command authority. Human resistance did not exploit this immediately. They did not need to. The system was collapsing on its own. In sole command, Ward watched the data flow stabilize into predictable decay patterns. "They're breaking apart faster than expected," she said quietly. Cole nodded. "They were never designed to operate like this." Hale looked at him. "Like what?" Cole answered. "In uncertainty." Above Earth, Seraph finally issued a last attempt to restore order. "Shut down all non-critical fleet autonomy layers. Force centralized override." A technician responded immediately. "Admiral, we can't." Seraph turned sharply. "Why not?" The technician's voice lowered. "Because the system no longer recognizes a single valid center." Silence filled the bridge. The Dominion had ruled for 10,000 years by enforcing absolute centralized authority. Now, in the middle of a war it believed it controlled, that very principle had become its greatest weakness. Seraph looked at the battlefield one last time. Human fleets were still outnumbered, still outgunned, still smaller in every measurable category. But they no longer needed to win battles directly. They only needed to maintain structural pressure. And the Dominion was already doing the rest. Inside Sole Command, final status reports arrived. Hale read them carefully. Dominion fleet cohesion below 30%. Ward exhaled slowly. "So it's over?" Cole shook his head slightly. "No." A pause. "This is just the part where they realize it." Above Earth, Seraph stared at the final degraded command grid. Then spoke quietly. "We underestimated them." No one corrected him, because it was no longer an understatement. It was an obituary. Across the galaxy, Dominion fleets continued to fragment into independent operational clusters. Some continued fighting. Some attempted retreat. Some simply stopped responding entirely. And for the first time in its 10,000-year history, the Galactic Dominion was no longer acting as an empire. It was acting as thousands of disconnected forces trapped inside a system they could no longer collectively understand. Back on Earth, Admiral Cole watched the final stabilization of orbital space. Ward stepped beside him. "It's done," she said. Cole nodded slowly. "For them." A pause. "And for us?" Cole looked at the stars above Earth. "No." Another pause. "Now comes the part where the galaxy learns what happens after an empire stops being one." Far beyond Sol System, civilizations that had once called humanity primitive were no longer laughing. They were watching, and for the first time in 10,000 years, they were afraid of what would happen next.